So the thing is, what Christianity is so good at doing, if it isn't just breaking things apart, which is a complete wrong way to go about it, is to say, is this livable? Does this make sense of my whole world? Not just a certain part of it, but the whole world. Does this stance that I'm looking at the world at, does it make sense of what it means to live well in this world? Does it give me a full picture of life?
Hmm.
From the way that I love my wife and my partner to my kids, to the way that makes me want to get up in the morning and move through the world and help people. Does the whatever I'm following, the truth that I'm holding at the moment, does it give me a full picture of life, or has it simply gave me a reduction picture of life?
Yeah.
Can I live in this world? Can I live in this? And this is what McGilchrist is trying to do, to synthesize that picture again, because we often live in a world that just wants to tear everything apart. And also it wants to give us some, often a lot of the pictures that we're given, the worlds that we're given, are just dehumanizing. And we know it intrinsically.
Yeah.
It's just unlivable.
Kia ora koutou, welcome to Lunch on the Way. I'm Joey, joined by Jonathan and Graham, and this is the start of season 4 of Lunch on the Way. Unreal.
2025. Let's go.
2025. It's a bit weird to say 2025, to be honest.
Yeah.
And
When you used to be in school,
it just struck me we're all looking a little bit older.
Come on.
no.
Oh, that maybe just me.
It's
You
been
know,
it's been a big summer.
I know this is really trivial, but I this morning I was putting on my glasses and I thought, oh my goodness, there's a white hair that's going wild out here. You can't see with my glasses on, so I'm really cool, but it's coming off when I get home.
Yeah, I feel younger. This is a good year. I'm excited about this year because
Yeah,
Fuck the system, Joey.
this is
yeah.
the year I'm going to be very busy, but also I'm going to prioritize my health a bit more.
That's good.
Number 2 is coming.
That's good.
Busy has got to have find new meaning for you, Joey.
Yeah, yeah. Second child. This is now. Oh, thanks, Graham. You've outed me. This is the public announcement of child number 2 on the way.
Oh,
It's not
mate.
a mystery. We're
That's
farther
how that's
along.
how 2025 is gonna roll, mate.
Yeah, yeah. Being outed all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Looking forward to that. I'm trying to get healthy so that when the baby does come, I'll inevitably gain more weight. And then so I don't like gain double weight from the first to the second, but like, go back to normal and then gain a little bit more weight, if you know what I mean.
You're
And so that's my
hilarious.
2025. What are you looking for towards Jonathan in 2025?
Oh gosh, man, you put me on the spot. What am I looking forward to? Um, I'm not sure yet. I haven't got that far. I feel like I'm still in summer mode. I
Yeah.
haven't even thought it. I have no goals. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm just seeing how it rolls. One of my highest things on the kind of what's that thing? Strength finders is adaptability. So I don't set goals. I just go with the flow. That
Yeah.
kind
I
of
love
works.
that.
That's a pure
Yeah.
creative right there.
That's right. Pure creative. Yep.
Yeah, that's you.
See how I rolled with that question? Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Exactly. You adapted.
Yeah. I
You went
adapted.
for it. How about you, Graham? What are you looking forward to?
Well, I'm very much into my bike at the moment. I'm riding to work, so I'm
Cool.
feeling very, very happy about that. So, that was a little of a long-term goal to try and get my find a thing I could do every day that would keep me healthy.
Yeah.
Biking to work is kind of
It's
easy.
working.
You know what's really funny is Graham's like, do you shower at work, Joey? I'm like, yeah, I do. There's showers in the basement. He's like, aren't they cold? I'm like, no, no, the hot water's working now. It's fine. And then so he bikes into work the next day, and then he walks up and I'm having a conversation with a colleague, and then the first thing Graham says is, "I just had a shower."
You know what somebody said to me yesterday?
Life
It was,
goals.
and I was a bit overtaken back. She says, "Oh, Graham, you smell nice."
I heard I was a part
Did
of
you
I
hear
was
that?
listening to that conversation.
Yeah.
I'm
So
like, uh-oh.
turned into a discussion of what what do you call cologne one uses.
Yeah, well, that's a great segue into our topic today.
Okay, good. Go for it.
Uh, Not really at all. I just don't want to continue the conversation of how you smell. Um, so
Awkward.
here's kind of framing what's going on. We've got a lot of interviews hopefully to be lined up. We've got two in particular we know are going to happen and two we really hope are going to happen before the middle of the year hits, which is really exciting. Uh, but in the meantime, for the conversation right now, I've been reflecting on and thinking is thanks so much for listening to this episode, and don't forget to
like and subscribe on YouTube.
And if you're listening to this on audio, don't forget to follow and rate.
we really appreciate your listening. Uh, this thing that's happened from basically it seems like loosely the 2010s or to 14 all the way to kind of present day, this phrase of deconstructing or deconstructing faith is kind of overdone. People, we've talked about it a lot, even casually, or, other people with podcasts or pastors or academics or whatever, theologians, or talking about this thing called deconstruction. And it's always framed within deconstructing like the tenets of the faith, or like, is Jesus God, and the resurrection, and is the Bible reliable, and all that kind of stuff. And within that came the advent of really, really good apologetics and really good approaches to answering some of those important questions. But I I have a funny feeling that we've been trying to answer questions uh, to questions people aren't really having. I My assumption is for the average person who's a Christian who who classify themselves as deconstructing their faith or in this like kind of tumultuous moment of existential crisis. I wonder if they're not as much deconstructing the Christian faith as much as deconstructing a model or the package of the Christian faith from which they kind of received and were growing up with. The reason why I say that is, yes, I know I have friends, my wife has friends who are kind of in this, who you could categorize as that. And what's funny is within all of the people I know who have been in this process of deconstruction or whatever, it's less about actual apologetics issues, and it's more of like a response or backlash over a particular expression of the church. It seems to be way more personal than intellectual. And so that's one thought. But then the other side of things is like, aren't we always kind of deconstructing and kind of reconstructing? Isn't that what education and thinking and critically thinking is? Isn't it always like an in you kind of take a leap, and then for a moment you're insecure about what you believe, but then you kind of figure things out along the way as you're living life, and then you kind of build back something different. And that is not linear. I don't know what other metaphor would be helpful, but it's not cyclical. It's just kind of like you're flowing through life and you're always dismantling and building up different things all the time.
Mhm.
And so I know that the term deconstruction is actually, isn't it a postmodern technical term,
Yeah,
Jonathan?
yeah,
So
that's right.
what
Comes
is
from Derrida.
what is deconstruction?
In the terms of postmodern thought,
Yeah, because obviously the term kind of started there, but then it's kind of taken on a life of its own somewhere else.
yeah, as I understand it, deconstruction, which comes from Jacques Derrida, is that there's no inherent stable truth inside of, well, what he would look at as a text, but then he'd expand that out into, say, the whole kind of structure of reality. There's no stable truth, and that we can keep on picking under things where someone would say this is certain, and then you'd say, well, I'll show you how it's not so certain. I'll show you that it's kind of built on your presuppositions, and then you can go on doing that infinitely. So a deconstruction is keeping on taking the bricks out of that solid ground that people thought they were standing on. It turns out it's not solid ground at all. So that's where Derrida kind of does that. And he did that through text. He did that by unpacking language, by unpacking people's works and showing how they turned out to be quite flimsy when they thought they were quite solid.
So what would be
Yeah.
the solid thing you think that Derrida would want to land on then? Was he basically saying there's nothing that's solid?
Exactly right.
So is it like quite nihilistic?
Derrida doesn't want to land anywhere. Yeah, and of course the pushback on that is that well, he certainly does land somewhere. He lands on deconstruction,
Yeah.
Which is a construction.
which is a construction. Yeah. So why should we believe that? That's the classic pushback. And
Yeah.
it's a you know, it's a bit of a cliche, but there is something to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
But I don't know how is that the same is deconstruction being used in the same way inside of kind of like the Christian circles that you're speaking about?
I don't I think not. I don't think it's as nihilistic as that kind of outlook,
Right.
where
Yeah.
it's not to deconstruct for the sake of deconstruction. I think it's to deconstruct to get to the truth. I think there is
Yes.
still a level of like there's something out there that I can hold on to. I
Yes.
just
Yeah.
don't think it's the thing that I'm currently living in right now.
Yeah.
But if your interpretation of Derrida is correct,
Yeah.
then 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 there's nothing to hold on to. And well, maybe deconstruction itself is the thing to hold on to. But we won't get too
Yeah.
technical into that. Within your
Yeah.
own experience, so either yourself or Graham, have what's been your relationship with this kind of like 21st century Christian phenomena of deconstruction, or people you know, or kind of maybe your own journey a little bit? What's going on with that?
Mm.
Because I feel like we're at quote unquote the tail end of it, but we're not really. It's just
Yeah.
not really a dominant point of conversation, but I still see it happening all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I've certainly known people that have deconstructed, so to speak, that have, in other words, they've walked away from the Christian faith. And they've done it because they've read people like Derrida and they've read people like Nietzsche and Sartre and all the kind of phenomenological kind of thinkers, the continental thinkers, and they've walked away from it. But strangely enough, you know, they haven't turned that same deconstruction upon the deconstructed. They haven't thought about, well, what makes this such an important kind of way of approaching the world. Um, and some of them, couple of them, have come back to faith because I think they have done that work of they've kept on pushing through where they've landed, and they found that that's really no answer at all either.
Hmm.
So, and they've come back to faith, maybe with fresh eyes and maybe not so fundamentalist in their kind of outlook and a bit more open, but with more faith that Jesus is the way. So that would be my experience of it.
It's an interesting one because I sort of do a funny flip here. When I first went off, and I come from a conservative background, when I first went off to Bible college, people thought I was going to lose my faith from that particular Pentecostal tradition. You go and do thinking you're kind of going into that world, you're going to lose your faith. And what I realized for me was that experience was the kind of holding thing. And I would say experience is kind of relationship with God, which I would say is an experience. I've had these experiences. That was sort of the holding space in one sense to go looking at the thinking things and to open Pandora's box or to look at this and to look at that. Does that make sense? In one sense, that was the holding, that was the grounding space, the kind of relationship with God, which you say, well, how did you maintain it? Oh, well, reading scripture. Yes, that sort of got questioned as well. But these memories of experience became the holding space to explore without sort of explore and I guess a sense of pulling apart, but I didn't feel I was completely everything's going to be lost. I don't know if I'm being very clear here, but the experience was the important part here,
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and
I
that's
resonate with that.
interesting. Eh?
I resonate with that. I think that's true. I remember I was a part of, as a pastor early on in my early 20s, I was a
Yeah.
part of leading a home group or a small group. And, they were all very tentative about expressing any sense of doubt that they might be feeling about Christianity. But they all felt it. And a part of me, I could kind of sense that in the room a little bit. That it's well, you can't express that you're doubting anything, right? That's not what Christians do. And I remember telling them, I'm like, I'll tell you what, I doubt things all the time. I'm like, I'm a pastor. I'm supposed to be leading you, and I doubt things all the time. But I'm like, I think the doubting is okay, and the unbelief, in one sense, not in a finality kind of way, but in a kind of like prodding kind of way,
Yeah.
is okay because it allows me to actually think. And if I actually want to think and I actually want to have faith, I need to kind of poke holes in a few things to see what's going on. Because I
Mhm.
don't think my faith is necessarily blind, but I also don't think that I can live life with absolute certainty about everything without having to express faith. So I said
Yeah.
there's a tension between the two. And I can see a lot of them being like, oh, thank goodness. It's just like it's almost like they had this expectation of what it meant to be a Christian as like you just are you're so resolute and you're never two-minded at all. I think they see the passage of where Jesus said, if you put your hand to the plow and look back, then you're not fit for the kingdom of God, as like a belief and unbelief type of passage.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm not quite sure if that's entirely what that passage means, but also I don't know anybody who kind of functions through life like that, or else you're not
Yeah.
thinking. And I
Yeah.
wonder, Graham, if that's within maybe the sense where, oh, Graham's going to Bible college, he could lose his faith. The assumption underneath that is don't think too much, or else you're going to inevitably lose your faith. Almost like thinking and faith are opposed to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joey, do you know where, I mean, do you know where a lot of people are, what kind of denominations most people are deconstructing from? Well, maybe most famously deconstructing from, because I
I
think that that's kind of maybe that's kind of telling about
Yeah.
what deconstruction is for
Well,
many
I
of these
know
people.
I know during like the end of the 2010s, like 2019 and into COVID, a lot of podcasts that I listened to that were more North American based were documenting this trend of I hate the term
Yeah.
ex-evangelical.
What is it?
Ex-vangelical.
Okay.
Basically,
Ex-vangelical.
broadly speaking, all these people, mostly millennials, are evangelical,
Hmm.
but then they're kind of deconstructing their faith from that particular expression of Christianity. And so they begin with actually, questioning everything.
Yeah.
But then what ultimately happens, it seems like, is they move more towards a bit of like a historically grounded, more contemplative expression of the faith, if
Yeah.
they do, when they do come back.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting. I was like, okay, so it seems like at least within the evangelical world that there's a large group of 25 at the time, 25 to 35-year olds who kind of don't necessarily like the tradition that they've received, and they kind of they somehow conflate that tradition with Christianity
Yeah.
as a whole. And then when they come back to realize that, oh, I should actually have faith in Jesus, they don't go back to that expression of Christianity. They go to more of like an Episcopalian in the US, which is Anglican, or a Catholic or an Eastern
Yeah.
Orthodox faith.
Yeah.
Um, and who was I talking to who said that? I was talking to somebody the other week who said that the Anglican Church in Australia is growing,
Right. That's interesting, eh?
where that's not the case in New Zealand.
Yeah. And
Um,
so you get a group of people going into the kind of more liturgical, traditional streams of Christianity, well, the
mhm,
ones that you just mentioned, and then I do recall a few people that there's another stream where people go into kind of militant atheism.
yeah,
I've seen a few people go down that line, and then a whole lot of people also going down the line of kind of Eastern religions,
yeah,
kind of Buddhism,
yeah,
like, well, a very kind of Western Buddhism, Western
yeah,
Taoism kind of stuff. Those kind of traditions too, right?
yeah. It kind of molds really well with contemporary Western culture, but like a spirituality of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yep.
exactly.
I'd say there's not to say too much. Yeah, I know somebody who has kind of deconstructed from that and is moving into like a oneness of the universe type spirituality.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's not uncommon either.
Yeah.
But coming from a evangelical background.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
But you
Yeah.
know,
I wonder whether part of the sort of the reaction, the deconstruction, is because there's something to deconstruct.
Yeah.
Do
well,
you
that's
know what
the
I mean? Like,
thing.
Yeah.
so the term is actually a building term, isn't it? Construction is a building term.
Yeah.
The building, so if to use that metaphor, the building
Mhm.
doesn't look right or it doesn't work. So, if you were to kind of play that out, well, if a building is there for shelter, then you do want to build something else
Yeah.
because humans
Yeah.
look for shelter and from the environment or some sort of structure. But
Hmm.
in saying that, I wonder whether if somebody's world is built on just certainty, that or the impulse has been certainty, or the posture's been they've been surrounded in an environment of absolute certainty. I think it pushes up against our humanity, which is actually we're creatures that are curious, and
Hmm.
and it pushes up against a world that actually is not certain, in the sense that it's full of mystery. So I think that's quite a move in that process to open oneself up to a world that actually is, from our perspective, full of mystery.
Hmm.
That's a good point, Grant, because it's not just this is one thing I really appreciated about who we hope to have on the podcast soon, what Mark Sayers has said, which is that it's not just the Christians who have been deconstructing. It's the quote unquote non-religious or agnostic or atheists that have been deconstructing their atheism. And
Yeah.
so it seems like to me that it's both ends, if you go far enough right and you go far enough left, they kind of both meet up at the top again.
Right.
If you use that political analogy, well, I think the same is true with almost any ideology. Um, where I think a fundamentalist atheist and a fundamentalist Christian both have a very similar take on reality in the world. They just
Mhm.
express their faith in two different places.
Right.
And so I think it's the fundamentalist atheists who are kind of rediscovering faith for the first time because they've been deconstructing that. But also, I think the fundamentalist Christians, and there's, whatever denomination that might be found in,
Mhm.
are also kind of deconstructing to find somewhere else that's not quite there because there's one thing that both of them have in common, and that is that they can live life with certainty
Yeah.
and that they are right and everyone else is wrong.
Yeah.
And what you've been saying, let's just say, Graham, if you live life like that, then what happens when you do discover nuance in the world?
Well, you inevitably
Happen-
do. You inevitably do because the arc of life is full of contingencies. A relative gets cancer, a marriage busts, a child has is sick, a natural calamity. So we're faced with the human experience is faced with a constant barrage of things that are not necessarily controllable.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And to flick the other way, is the world out of control? No, because I think that takes us in a wrong direction. That's why I like the word mystery. There's a sense in which we have to take a humble position.
So,
So I think that's a kind of a posture and a caricature of a sort of humility to recognize that we are not the center of the world. Um, I know it sounds like, oh, am I the centre of the world? But that sort of attitude or posture of certainty, it has that feel about it.
yeah.
I can control everything around me. We can't.
And
So,
so,
yeah.
no, sorry for interrupting you, Zoom. It's not always
No, you go
perfect.
for it. Yeah.
Within that, like what I've been really exploring, and I wonder, Jonathan, if you want to pipe in here a
Mhm.
little bit, is I do believe in truth, that there's truth in the world. I'm not a postmodernist when it comes to there's no such thing as absolute truth. I think there is. However, I'm also coming to realize from my perspective, from my vantage point, I can't know with certainty what that absolute truth is.
Right.
And so I don't. We'll get into maybe have a whole other podcast episode about Ian McGilchrist's book when he published in 2021. But a combination of this, what I've been reading with Smith about how what really undergirds everything in reality and in from our experience in the world is faith.
Mm.
Like every single person, it doesn't matter whether you're religious, non-religious, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Everyone has to presuppose some level of faith in something in order to actually act and function and to live in the world. And not only to live, but also to think. And so, Jonathan, I know you've looked maybe a little bit into kind of this level of truth. And I think I wonder if like the fundamentalist, whether atheist or Christian or whatever, the fundamentalist error is that they don't acknowledge that. They don't acknowledge that from our vantage point, we actually can't know with 100% certainty.
That may be true. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But maybe it seems like that from the outside, looking at fundamentalist thinking, that that they have a perfect take on the world, and and maybe obviously I don't think that's true at all. What I would say that truth is always this McGilchrist would say that truth is a relationship, and we can talk about there's a difference between facts, brute facts, and truths. So, and that McGilchrist would make the kind of the argument, we can look at science. Science tends to look at the brute facts of life, but it's always making a value judgment on those truths, on those brute facts, and that is the relationship to truth. Like, what do these brute facts mean to me? And it's that relationship that is the truth, and that constantly needs refining. It constantly needs us to be saying, do I have the correct take on this? Am I understanding this? So truth is always in flux. It's always a relationship. And hopefully we're in a position where it's getting refined the whole time, that we're getting closer to a correct take on the world. Or are we moving away from that correct relationship? Or are we coming into a greater relationship with the world? That's how I would put as what truth is.
I'm just thinking about what you're saying, Jonathan. So here might be a way of me expressing what I think you're saying here.
Yeah.
So so I'm praying, and my wife hasn't been that well. I'm praying, help her, having to put rather clumsy prayers, but as much as we're human, how do we find a way forward here? What that she gets better, and then certain circumstances happened, and she's able to have tests and da da da. Now so I've prayed, this happens, so I'm attuned to seeing that God could be at work here. So I see that as actually God's answering prayer.
Yeah.
So the fact is that actually she's got some tests, but the way that I'm seeing that is the truth is God answers prayer.
Right.
Not because I've said that, but because there's something going on here, and I'm relating to my world and to what's happening to her in a way that's seeing something.
Yeah.
So the truth is here for me that actually God is answering prayer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's right. And
it's it's the way we're relating to that experience.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly right. And the truth of a situation is that you're relating in the right way, in the way that relationship is needed at that time.
Yeah.
And that kind of way you're standing in truth. You're not working against truth of the situation. You're in flow with it. You're resonating with it. And in that moment, you're in truth with that relationship.
Yeah, so there's
not really the brute facts of it. You're making a value judgment about what's correct.
Yeah. And there's a dynamism about that. It lives. It's not.
It lives.
That's right. it could become cold and functional once you take that out and says God answers prayer as a sort of proposition.
Exactly right.
And there's
Yep.
no relationship to that,
Yep.
which is what we do.
That's right. Yep. And we
But
turn truth again into something that sits away from us.
yeah.
No, we're always in the flow of truth, and you're either being more truthful to the situation or not. It can't be something that sits away from you. Truth is not a brute fact that sits somewhere else. You're always making a value judgment about what is truthful about this situation. How should I act here? What's the right way to act? What's the right thing to do in this situation? That is the flow of truth. And that's why Christianity would say truth is a relationship. It's a person. How do I come into contact with this person? How am I in the correct relationship with it? And when we take on the mind of Christ, when we take on the Spirit, when we have the Spirit of God within us, God is directing us to know how to look at the world and act in the world truthfully. That's why science never gives you the truth. It may give you brute facts, but it doesn't tell you how to interpret those facts. And what we would say as Christians is that God helps us to interpret the facts truthfully. That is the truth. You can't step out of it. You're either moving towards it, acting in it, but never out of it. So you can either act for it or you can act against it.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm reminded here of even the Lord's Prayer, our Father who art in heaven. That's a movement towards a kind of a pointing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pointing towards whatever that is, we're bringing towards our Father in heaven, which comes back to, like, thinking before we started off, Joey, when I said, when you look at something or something new and my experience holds me. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's like,
No, it makes sense because your experience holds you. And I think that's where you and I have a similar kind of story a little bit, regardless of whatever thoughts come in, whether doubting or belief or unbelief or whatever. It's actually the experience in the past or in the moment that holds you, because I think the experience is actually what you just said, Jonathan. That's your engagement with truth.
Yeah,
Is
that's
an
right.
experience. So to bring my story in a bit closer, like I remember like the first time somebody ever prayed for me to receive Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life.
Yeah.
And I'm just like overcome in that moment, and it's not like there's no brute fact about it. It's purely, it's almost like the purest form of what you just said, how truth is a relationship.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, all right. And it doesn't matter what thoughts come into my mind. And even if I try and rationalize that experience away, that experience still kind of grounds me in something.
That's
And
right.
I remember telling a friend who a few years ago, I think just before COVID, who said, I'm really in a deconstructing type of moment. This person lives somewhere else in New Zealand, and I don't know really what to do. I thought I was talk to you and what advice you might have for me, because I just feel a little bit on shaky ground. And I said, I'll tell you what the worst thing you could do is right now. The worst thing you could do is think that there's such a thing as a default of thinking, or a default way of living, because that will inevitably take you away from the community of faith. I said, I think you should make sure you always show up to church on a Sunday morning, that you're always worshiping. Yeah, pull back from serving if you feel like you can't with integrity lead worship and stuff like that. But you should always be engaged, because the second you remove yourself from that community, you've already decided what your outcome's going to be. And you've decided that there's actually a default to reality. And so you've already concluded before you've even really begun the process.
Right.
And that's because I think the experience piece is actually him is confronting truth. It's in that relationship with truth. It's not just a head thing or a propositional or brute fact thing, like you said, Jonathan. You have to confront truth.
That's right.
Yeah, not confront it. You live with it. You live in it.
Live into it. Yeah.
Live into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things I loved. Graham, I really want you to read that part two, of McGilchrist's book. And honestly, once you read part two, we need to have just a whole separate conversation on this and just kind of let it flow. And then if everyone who's listening is like, I'm never going to read this book, that's okay because we're just having a lot of fun talking about it. But the one thing in this book that just like it's so intuitive, and when he says it, I'm like, that's so true. It's just plainly obvious is that everything in life, including the scientific method itself, is has undergirding it a faith proposition.
Yeah.
And that faith proposition is the metaphor by which it is the metaphor it uses to understand reality. And so he talks about how the mechanistic metaphor, how the reality is a machine, is that metaphor by which we, the subject, are actually changing the object in a sense. And it's like the filter through which we see reality. And when he said that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like, I understand what you mean now, how truth is a relationship. It's like, yeah, the brute fact is when you place something, above your head and you drop it and it falls, the brute fact is, yeah, there's this thing, we'll just call it gravity, that's pulling everything down towards the earth. But how that works, you need a metaphor to understand how that works. And that's where the faith comes in.
Yeah.
Because the metaphor actually filters what you can see and what you will see and what you won't see when you look at the brute fact.
That's right.
So if I want to bring that then to more of like a Christian faith proposition, if we bring, because people don't see science as faith, then let's look at, say, the brute fact of the resurrection of Jesus for a second. Okay. Yeah, I know, right? The brute fact of that is whether you agree with the fact or not. Let's just assume you do. Anyway, yeah, we won't go through that can of worms. Is that Jesus was raised from the dead? All right, that's just a statement. It's a fact. Let's just say it's a fact. Okay, like gravity. That that kind of means nothing until you actually come into a relationship and move that from fact to truth. And 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 yeah. Anyway, I don't know what else I'm going to say about that, but it's almost like I see both very similarly.
Yes.
I was just making that, the thing that we call the movement to something, or the relationship to something, is, I quite like that word, the notion of making. And we're always making ourselves in one way or another. And I wonder whether the metaphor carries us in the making. So the language that we're using is actually shaping the relationship. So appropriate metaphors, or looking for the right metaphors, becomes maybe part of the journey of the deconstruction construction.
One of the things, coming back to what you were saying, Joey, about breaking things down, deconstruction, but also science does this. We live in a world at the moment that loves to break things into its parts. It just takes everything apart. We teach critical thought as if all critical thought is supposed to do is take things apart and find out what they are. And so what we tend to do is we're making people. We are coming back to what you were saying, poesis, the making of things. We're making people that love to tear things down. And what McGilchrist is so interesting is saying, he said, okay, that's part of how we think. We love to take things apart. But the greatest form of thinking is putting things together, how to synthesize things, to say what it all means. And McGilchrist talks about a gestalt. And
I just read that.
Is that how you pronounce that? I didn't know how to pronounce that. I called it a gestalt.
Yeah, gestalt. And that it means the whole. It means the whole. So the thing is, what Christianity is so good at doing, if it isn't just breaking things apart, which is a complete wrong way to go about it, is to say, is this livable? Does this make sense of my whole world? Not just a certain part of it, but the whole world. Does this stance that I'm looking at the world at, does it make sense of what it means to live well in this world? does it give me a full picture of life?
Hmm.
From the way that I love my wife and my partner, to my kids, to the way that makes me want to get up in the morning and move through the world and help people. Does the whatever I'm following, the truth that I'm holding at the moment, does it give me a full picture of life, or has it simply gave me a reduction picture of life?
Yeah.
Can I live in this world? Can I live in this? And this is what McGilchrist is trying to do, to synthesize that picture again, because we often live in a world that just wants to tear everything apart. And also it wants to give us often a lot of the pictures that we're given, the worlds that we're given, are just dehumanizing. And we know it intrinsically.
Yeah.
It's just unlivable. So McGilchrist is wanting to synthesize. I think Christianity gives you a full picture of life. Yeah.
Yeah. No, sorry, I would interrupt.
Yeah.
So that, what did you say? Gestalt?
Gestalt.
Gestalt. So
Yeah.
that term, I need to further define that term, because what you said is really important, but there's one important aspect of it. And correct me if I'm wrong. A gestalt is the whole, but what it means is the whole cannot actually be reducible by its parts.
That's right.
Because then it's no longer that whole anymore. So, for example, like, I think I don't know what passage. I'm horrible at memorizing because I'm just lazy, I guess. Is it Paul, or who says, no, it's Jesus himself. It's like, people will know you're my disciples by how you love.
Yep.
That's a gestalt.
Yep.
That is the apologetic of the church.
Yep.
Because people will it's like its love is living in the world.
Yep.
And it is the application, or it is the essence of the Christian faith that's rooted in Christ. And so you can't necessarily be like, well, is Christianity true based on its like doctrinal propositions? Well, that's important. Yes, let's look into that. Is it true compared to other religious statements or facts? Well, let's look into that. But I think at the end of the day, it's actually Christianity is most convincing, not based on its parts, but based on its whole.
I think that's right. I think that's right.
And you don't the only way to come into contact with the whole of Christianity is not through proposition. It is through living.
I think that's exactly right. And you know what? It's not that it does away with reason. It's not that Christianity, the whole picture of Christianity does away with science.
No.
It doesn't. In fact, it supports it.
Yeah.
But what it does is it fills it out. It gives it meaning and it gives it depth. And so it gives you a full picture of life rather than just one little aspect of life.
Yeah.
Because, for example, you look at your wife. Science would want to or certain methodologies will want to just break that down into its parts. She's just a bunch of chemicals and a bunch of, molecular structures. But why do you love her then? Why do you love her? Why would you go out your way to sacrifice yourself for her? There's a fullness to a person, just as there's a fullness to life, that the kind of deconstructed life, the only critical life will never let you get to. And therefore, it can't be true. Or it's not the full truth. Because we know intrinsically that life is way more meaningful than that. How do we know that? Because we actually live it every day. That's how you know. But we're also told not to trust our gut. And I think that's, McGilchrist would say, is so wrong.
Yeah, you need to, because
don't discount the emotions.
No.
Your emotions tell you a truth way before it rises to your consciousness.
Yeah,
you got to trust it. But we live in this weird world where you say you've got to be objective the whole time.
Yeah,
that's absolutely false.
Yeah, and I mean that's the Gilchrist thing of the orientation of the left hemisphere of the brain to want to measure, to step it all out, to quantify it.
Yeah.
But as you said, you can't quantify love. What is it? You can't define it in the sense of a breaking down. we were
No.
given expressions of it, but it's
Yeah. And then
we
you would
feel
say,
it,
and when
we feel it and we see it, but it's not, it can't measure it.
you can't measure it, but when you're living in it, you feel the truth of it.
Yeah.
You feel like you're in the right relationship with this other person. Again,
Yeah,
we come back to truth.
and then what you get out of this is, I think, again, the transcendence play into this. There's beauty, there's goodness, and
Yep.
there's truth. They're all playing together in a unity,
That's
which is
right.
love.
Yeah.
So those
And
are
that's
bubbling
right.
up. Those are bubbling. We're seeing beauty in ways we never saw it before.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking of I've worked for my grandson, and it's just sheer delight.
Hmm.
Which is, why is that so? Because actually there's a kind of a, how would you put it? There's a making towards love of two loving parents and grandparents, and
Yep.
so the child is delights in this, and there's a beauty in that.
Yeah.
So, which could be the other way too. Actually, could be violence and hatred and unforgiveness, and
Yep.
then you would see something that wasn't quite so beautiful. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think I think I love how our conversations go places you don't expect, but to bring it back to, I guess, my first kind of proposition or
Yeah.
question to kind of round things out is I don't think people are necessarily deconstructing Christianity proper
Yeah.
as much as they're deconstructing the package of that particular version of Christianity is held in. And so I think I'm doing a lot of reading of church leadership and vision and value books at the moment for my
Right.
PhD. And what they as I read each of them, I get a sense, and this I don't want to be too critical because this is, I guess, picking on too many churches, including my own possibly, is they're way too narrow. They have a
Yeah.
very narrow version of what it means to be a Christian, what it means to be a church.
Mm.
And it's they seem to use a very mechanistic,
Yeah.
machine-like metaphor
Yeah.
for the church.
Yeah.
They view the church as the body of Christ as an efficient causality, and they find that the church molds very well with a business type approach
Yeah.
to ministry.
Yeah.
And and I
And is it right
think,
that they're looking for those causal mechanisms?
yeah,
Yes, that's
Okay,
right.
if I
because they're
just tinker
yeah,
this, then that'll set off a chain reaction that will then tinker that, and
yeah,
suddenly the machine will be working right again. Like
exactly.
there's a bug in the system, but let's look for the causal mechanisms. Let's break it down to its parts
Yeah. Well, exactly. And they
where they
don't
don't even
they
have the picture right.
no, and so the whole, like the gestalt, which you
Yeah,
mentioned, is it's
exactly.
not in view. It's only
It's
the
not in
parts.
view.
And so the assumption is the parts in the right places at the right time equal a beautiful whole. However, so what I think people are actually
Yeah,
doing is they intuitively, at a gut level, like you've just mentioned, they
yeah,
you can't necessarily pinpoint it in its parts,
yeah.
but you just feel it. You're like, well, if this is Christianity, then this is for some reason deeply unsatisfying.
Yes, that's a great point. Yep,
And
that's right.
and as much as I believe in in evangelism and the mission of God, and I really think I think churches should grow. I don't disagree with any of those things. I think it's okay that churches grow, of course. Like if they do, that's wonderful. That's a great thing. However, to reduce everything down to one particular aspect of what the church is to kind of forget the whole. And if you view the church as like a conveyor belt of bringing people in through the front door to have a particular output, and that's what you categorize as mission or as, what people should be all about when it comes to church and when it comes to being the people of God, I think people just at a gut level are like, there's more, right? It's not just what I do and what I contribute that
Yeah,
actually matters. There's something more to it than that. And I
that's right.
think there is, like when you read the Gospels and you read even the book of Acts, which you can read with a mechanistic lens if you want, which I try not to, you get this sense that there is more. Instead of instead of just viewing reality as the mission of God, which is important. I'm not saying that's not important. Viewing reality as all of God's and viewing the world as deeply enchanted by God.
Yeah,
And seeing these changing the metaphors changes everything.
I think that's right. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, McGilchrist talks about this, right? Well, I know we're right at the end, where he says that gut feeling, because it's been processed by the right hemisphere, and the right hemisphere doesn't have language, it's very difficult for people to articulate what feels wrong in their church setting, because it's everything has to be risen to kind of, it has to be articulated. It has to be articulated in a certain kind of way. It needs to be spoken about. You need to speak about it. Otherwise, you're not really thinking clearly. Where McGilchrist would say, no, the right hemisphere, the gut feel, is always, it doesn't have language, but it's viewing the world more correctly. So as pastors, we need to learn how to listen to our parishioners.
I'm just going to say
in ways that we are trained in language, trained to think through those propositions. But most people are just they're just gonna talk with their feet. They're just gonna leave. So, but what they're doing there is actually trying to articulate something to us, that they're not being valued, or that we're not forming churches that are secure and safe places for them, where they can become fully human. Because it hasn't risen to consciousness, and it never will. But it's that gut feeling that this isn't right. The picture isn't right.
So I was thinking on your line of what you were saying, Jonathan, the right hemisphere, in terms of, the deconstruction, is actually the response really is one, and it's right hemisphere response, of a listening.
Yeah.
Of a listening and an open space of articulation of a conversation that clarifies.
Yeah.
Because there isn't a language thing. It's wanting to discern. So the posture is one of listening and discernment. It's playing much more in that space than is actually providing answers and certainties.
I think that's right. And I think
that would be quite a response, isn't it?
That makes sense. And I think it touches on what you said to your friend, Joey, where you said, don't leave. Like, because then you've already made the decision. But whoever your friend is dealing with something that can't be articulated. So I think what Greame is saying is that you need to stay in conversation, because these things take a while to surface.
And this is good, actually.
Yeah, it's good. It's good, and it's normal. Yeah. It's normal and it's right. But you need to be around people that allow you to work it out, allow the language to come, give you space to be able to kind of just feel your way through it. But often we don't do that because we're so mechanistic. We're like, oh, hang on, that part's not working well in the machine. Remove it. It's faulty. Take it out. It's like, that isn't life. Come back to a garden metaphor. Just put it on the vine in a different kind of way. Give it a chance to blossom. Maybe it needs to go to seed for a while. Keep it in the garden. It's not a machine. You don't have to replace the part. So, yeah.
I was just thinking, actually, this is where the Spirit is. In the sense of, it is actually, in other words, the person that's doing this, rather than having a kind of mode of like, you shouldn't be thinking like that, or you're going to walk off the cliff, there's actually, I think, a really more interesting and, as we're sort of talking, pastoral response of listening, of discernment, and almost the compliments is actually the Spirit's at work here. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Actually, the Spirit's inviting you into a space that's extending you.
Mm-hmm.
And so then there's I guess that the way in which we're moving forward, our relationship changes to the situation.
Exactly.
Yes.
Because we're not talking brute facts here. We're talking a right relationship to the people in the world around us. Yeah. That takes time to learn.
Yeah.
Brute facts, you can just give someone a textbook. Here, just learn this, mate. You'll be good. But truth has to become your truth. You have to stand in it. It has to be yours. It's just like Thomas. He had to find Jesus. All the disciples told him the facts, but Thomas had to come and find Jesus himself. Truth isn't true until it's yours.